week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Liz Truss is insisting that an economic slump is not inevitable and says there's too much talk that there's going to be a recession. In an interview with The Sun on Sunday, the Foreign Secretary says ambition could help to avoid the Bank of England's forecast. The central bank cautions that the UK could face the largest recession since the 2008 financial crisis due to rising energy prices. If she becomes PM, Ms Truss plans to introduce immediate tax cuts, which she believes will spur growth of the economy. She's also promising a small business and self-employed revolution. Former Levelling Up Minister Michael Gove is endorsing Rishi Sunak to become our next Prime Minister. Writing in The Times, he accused Liz Truss of taking a holiday from reality over her plans to cut taxes to ease the rising cost of living. He also said he wouldn't be returning to frontline politics. The Transport Secretary has written to the Secretary-General of the RMT, urging him to accept an 8% pay rise for his members. Grant Shapps calls it a fair offer and says the strikes are causing long-term damage to the rail sector. Only 20% of the UK rail network has been running today due to a strike by union members from 18 train companies. Some parts of the country have been left with no service at all. P&O Ferries will not face criminal proceedings over its firing of hundreds of workers earlier this year. The firm sparked a backlash after it sacked almost 800 staff without notice in March, replacing them with agency workers. Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng had asked the Insolvency Service to decide if laws had been broken. Civil proceedings are still ongoing. Workers at Britain's busiest port are due to go on an 8-day strike from tomorrow in a dispute over pay. Around 1,900 members of the Unite Union working at the port of Felixstowe are expected to walk out. Port officials say the action will be an inconvenience rather than a catastrophe. Felixstowe handles nearly half of all container freight entering Britain. The United Nations Secretary-General says the international community should work together to export Russian and Ukrainian food and fertilizers to global markets. Antonio Guterres says an agreement reached last month covers non-sanctioned products from both countries. He believes open access is crucial to calming commodity markets and lowering prices for consumers. And Russia has reported new drone strikes a day after explosions hit military bases in contested Ukrainian territory and mainland Russia as well. Last week, there were also large explosions at an airbase in Russian-annexed Crimea. Analysts say the attacks and their distance from the front line show the growing strength of Ukraine's forces. President Zelensky has yet to comment officially on these incidents. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Time now for Headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Leo Kearse, and tonight, as proof of GB News' shocking left-wing bias, I'm joined by top comedians Dame Baptiste and Ben Norris. How you doing, chaps?
Good, thank you.
Nice. Last time I saw you, I think we were doing a gig in a bingo hall in North London.
Oh, that was a thrill, wasn't it?
yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, it's nice to be not performing there tonight.
Yeah.
Dane, how are you?
I'm good. I've yet to do the bingo hall gig, but I'm hoping that you guys will pass on the details so I can sort myself out as well.
Absolutely,
Heard
man.
nothing but good things.
Yep, absolutely.
It's booked by two fat ladies.
Nice. Well, let's take a look at tomorrow's front pages, and we start with the Sunday Telegraph. So Truss says she'll halt the NHS doctor exodus. I don't know if she's going to tether them, offer them bribes, or how that's going to work. And also, Kwasi Kwarteng says the energy cap is to hit £6,000 as Kwarteng targets win profits. £6,000 every time. Every time I see that cap, it's gone up another £1,000. Moving on to the Observer, Labour surges amid Tory fears over Truss's tax cut plans. So we're going to be covering that story shortly. And also, libraries are going to offer warm shelter for the winter as people are struggling with energy bills, can't heat their houses, they can go to the library. There's also books in there. Moving on to the Sunday Times. We've got universities pushing for vital tuition fee rise. So UK students must pay closer to £24,000 a year or lose their places to foreigners, argue bosses. Just get a trade. I'd just get a trade instead of going to university or become a stand-up comedian. And also we've got Trump's ridiculous GCHQ bugging claims that soured the special relationship. I assume they're talking about the relationship between UK and US there, and not Rebecca Vardy and someone else. Here we've got on the Sunday Express, we've got Boris. Mighty trade deal to cut bills. Remember Boris? He was our Prime Minister until he went on holiday forever. But he's back in the Sunday Express and he's making promises. I assume he's going to get that done in his last week. And finally, on the Daily Star, we've got Princess Diana death cover-up. So spies may have clipped Di's car. And Di's driver was in fact a scapegoat. So the Daily Star, always at the forefront of breaking news there, with something that happened about 30 years ago. And that's our front pages. Let's kick things off with the Observer, and Labour are surging in the polls, apparently, Dane.
That's right. As we mentioned previously, Labour surges as Tory fears grow over Truss's tax cut agenda. Likely PM's policies will mean big trouble, say critics, as Starmer's energy price initiative boosts him in the polls. Basically, Liz Truss has suggested that some tax cuts will encourage investment within the UK economy and will avoid what she perceives to be the inevitable cost of living crisis deepening and worsening. However, she has many detractors, particularly within her own party, including recently dismissed and Levelling Up Minister Michael Gove, who said she is on holiday from reality. While this is all happening, Labour continues to climb in the polls and are enjoying a 43% increase, 15 points ahead of the Conservatives on 28%, which is one of the biggest leads they've had in 10 years. So she has a lot of critics regarding her approach.
Yeah.
Not looking great. I mean, for me, I think it's fine. I think Liz Truss is a fitting replacement for Boris Johnson. And in terms of some of the outlandish claims she is making, if she does assume the ministerial level of Prime Minister.
So you think she's an improvement on Boris Johnson?
I mean, again, I have more of an ulterior motive. And for me personally, and I'm sure that a lot of the viewers here can agree with me, I just love the schadenfreude of watching some of the British public have to choose between a woman, an Asian man, and a left-leaning gentleman in the form of Keir Starmer.
Yeah, and you're making it sound as if that's a difficult choice for Tories, when in fact their leadership race was probably the most diverse leadership race in British political history, and certainly more diverse than anything in the Labour Party. Do you think, Ben? Do you think Labour's lead in the polls could translate? What do you think about this? Could it translate to electoral success?
It might be a bit early, mightn't it? Because these things happen and then they're forgotten in the whole news agenda. But it's a sort of you're shooting at an open goal, aren't you? When you say we're going to help you not slide into poverty.
Yeah.
And you would have thought one of the Conservative leadership hopefuls might have, used a similar tactic by now.
Yeah.
But they're weirdly not bothered by that, which is, you'd think they'd at least be pretending they were going to do something.
Exactly, yeah, because politicians are great at saying what you want to hear, so you vote for them. And so you'd think they'd do that, then get in and be like, well, actually, you know what, I can't do that.
Yeah, and similarly, I guess it's quite easy for the opposition to make all sorts of claims when they're so far from power. But, you know, we'll see, won't we?
Yeah, and also Truss's tax cuts. I mean, I'd have thought, you know, the money you save in tax, you could spend on electricity. I don't know, just...
I mean, there has to be electricity to spend it on. So there's only so much more money can stretch. It can't actually be transformed. But I think, there seems to be a distinct amount of worry from Conservative colleagues, particularly. They don't think that she will be able to hold on to the red wall, which the Conservatives were able to reclaim from Labour.
Yeah.
And I don't think it actually sits well with a lot of the blue wall. And they've seen, a considerate decline as even Dominic Raab has gone on to criticise Liz Truss's approach, as none of these people seem to believe that her proposition will encourage more enhancement of the economy from investment from larger enterprises and business.
Yeah, so you could see Truss falling between two stools and pleasing neither the red wall or the you know, the sort of the traditional Tory voters. Well,
I think she's trying to appeal maybe to potential donors and maybe larger businesses, but I think she is been massively ignorant of some of the apprehension of investment that overseas interests may have, as well as the fact that we are still going towards a cost of living crisis. Yeah. And because of the fact that Keir Starmer has taken initiative to tell people what they want, particularly at this point in time, it seems that she's not particularly cognizant of what is needed from potential voters.
Right, yeah.
Perhaps she's standing on two stools to look over the red wall. See how things are going.
Sounds dangerous. That sounds against all health and safety regulations.
Yeah.
Well, moving on, Sunday's Observer and Boris Johnson's legacy looks like it's disintegrating very quickly, Ben.
Yeah, so apparently this was a flagship scheme called Way to Work, which... you know, it was to try and get... Well, they set the target at 500,000 people to get back into work. And then we discover that the target itself was about half the amount of people that would normally find work in that period and have done every year since 2001. That, again, is a brilliant bit of politics, isn't it? Set a target.
It's like saying, I'll make a cup of tea today. Yeah. It's like an easily achievable target.
Yeah, and so they've achieved it. Brilliant. They've achieved half of what would have happened if they hadn't even sort of got involved.
Yeah.
So this job seeker thing, it's quite interesting, isn't it, that Boris Johnson was involved in this, and then suddenly he was himself looking for work.
So surprising behaviour from someone that's been fired at every job they've ever had and has recently been forced to resign and still has failed to vacate the premises and has now decided to go on holiday instead. Yeah. So is it really that surprising when you think about it?
But also what they're forcing people to do is apply for jobs that are outside their normal remit. So they'll cut off your benefits. If you're an architect and you keep applying for architecture jobs, they're like, you know, diversify. So I was wondering what transferable skills Boris has for other careers. I mean, I've just made a
holiday rep, I'd say. Maybe.
Well, I've got
time in Greece.
I've got sperm donor. He's pretty good at that.
Yeah, that's pretty good as well. Yeah.
Interior decorator. No connection.
And maybe that's where we got the figure from of 500,000 would be for the last sperm donation that he made.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, for somebody who was so reticent to go, he really clung on in number 10 for so long. He now seems to not want to do it at all. He's just he's gallivanting around and seems to be AWOL.
Imagine it was part of some occupational Ponzi scheme he had where he's like, I'll keep my job and jobs for everybody else. And they were like, how many? He was like, 500,000 people, that's fine. And that's twice as high than it's ever been. If anyone's going to do it, I'm going to do it.
But it also looks prone to a lot of confusion because the scheme is called the Way to Work scheme, and that could be confusing if you were looking for way to work.
Yeah, especially if you're looking to Boris Johnson as a way to work. And I would advise most people, if you are trying to set a good example professionally, that is not the way to work. Boris Johnson's way.
I mean, in fairness to Boris Johnson and the Tory government, even though we're seeing a lot of economic catastrophe at the moment, unemployment is still really low. It's 3.8%, which is lower than it was before the pandemic, and it's lower than it was 3 months ago. So even though we seem to be going into a period of inflation and economic turmoil, people are still working.
Yes. But what
in what industries are we saying? Are we saying maybe like people that work in like as bailiffs in reclamation, asset stripping? We have to kind of think about what industries are to flourish, because those ones tend to be prospering quite well. And then
I think that's going to grow and grow, that sector.
I think it's going to do quite well. I'm also predicting OnlyFans if anyone's thinking about stock investments.
OnlyFans, that's coming back. The pandemic hit, it's coming back. OK, moving on to the next story. We've got Sunday's Independent, and who would have thought it was possible to sack 800 staff over Zoom and get away with it, Dane?
It looks like P&O would have thought so, because they seem to have gotten away with it. The company sparked public anger when it was hauled in front of MPs to answer questions where it sacked 800 workers without notice in March. Now, they have themselves admitted that they may have broken the law by not giving any prior notice before firing up to like 786 people. But according to Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng, he still needs to do some further investigations as to whether any offences had been committed. Nautilus, who is the international company supporting these workers, say it is a real kick in the face to them, especially as P&O have announced record profits.
Yeah. And Ben, like this seems, I mean, it seems on the face of it, I'd have thought sacking 800 staff or nearly 800 staff over Zoom, purely to, as I understand it, they were just going to sack them to replace them with cheaper staff. I mean, that doesn't sound legal or feasible.
Doesn't sound good, does it? And we all did those Zoom gigs during lockdown, and it's quite a tough environment. Anyway,
he means that's OnlyFans.
Oh yeah. Whichever way you want to put it, but yeah.
I mean, you can do it clothed as well. That's another option. Yeah. But it must be. It's a very weird environment, Zoom, isn't it? It's quite strange for a meeting. Very weird for a stand-up gig.
Yeah.
But to lose your job in that format must be very surreal.
Yeah.
You sign off and go, I think I've just lost my job.
Yeah, and I'd like to, if I lose my job, I'd like to at least have trousers on. You know, and those stand-up gigs over lockdown. Oh my God, it was brutal having, because everybody was there like little squares. Well, you know what it was like, but then you'd be able to see in the little squares what people were doing. Yeah. And it wasn't like in a comedy club where everybody sat facing you. You'd literally see somebody get up and like go to the toilet and come back like in the middle of a routine.
Yeah, it's quite disturbing seeing people in their homes.
Yeah,
because everyone was more relaxed than they would be in a comedy club situation.
Yeah.
But I guess this is the equivalent of us getting sacked over Zoom and then immediately being replaced by a cheaper comic for the world nation.
It doesn't get much cheaper than Zoom, which makes it much worse. But I mean, I think it's really terrible what P&O Ferries have done. It's strange that Kwasi Kwarteng has not been able to discover if any legislation exists which would be able to punish P&O for their actions. But I would go so far as to say that they have done more to damage the lives at sea than Somalian pirates ever could. So who is the real enemy is the question, if you ask me.
Well, maybe that's what the staff should do. Take the ferries over and set off as pirates. So the Mail on Sunday, and there's something whiffy about this story, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, it is unusual to see a pooey story in the Daily Mail. But it's very, so there's, essentially an awful lot of sewage has been leaked out into the Sussex coast. And what a terrible time of year for that to happen, where so many people are in the sea, because we're having a beautiful summer. And it must be very disturbing to find yourself floating in the sea next to a floater in the sea. Might be particularly weird if the reason you've gone into the sea is to have a wee. You kind of feel a bit like you were getting your just desserts there. Or weirder still, if something floated past and you kind of recognised it.
Have you been to the beach this summer? Because it has been absolutely roasted.
I haven't visited. I've been very concerned on the state of our waters, and which is very sad given the fact that a large amount of Brexiteers who voted for Leave, one of the catalysts for that was the promise of having our own waters returned to us. And it's very sad to see that those waters are now being very muddied, and we are up the equivalent of Crap Creek without a paddle. This goes a lot further than mudslinging. And just as we were saying that P&O caused the most damage to seafarers, I'd go as far to say that dumping raw sewage, the worst of all sewages, as we know.
Yeah. The cooked sewage is much more.
Yeah. Only
Bubbling in a pot.
ever so slightly, yeah. But it's, I mean, it's terrible. I read a story previously where I heard that only 8 million Britons only shower once during the week, which I found
Once a week?
Once a week.
Oh my God.
And it wasn't in any kind of medieval times. I think it was just in the regular times, Leo.
Yeah.
And yeah, I, like you, was astounded and disgusted by the revelation of this.
But that is
statistic.
good for saving water, which
Yeah.
we're being
I mean, it's
encouraged
also
to
good
do.
for saving your skin, because now I understand that you could be swimming in raw sewage. I understand why people maybe just chance it once a week.
Yeah, and protecting your biome. But talking of Brexit, because I have seen in some papers they've tried to pin the blame for this on Brexit, as if when we were in the European Union, we never flushed, raw sewage out to sea or into our waterways.
Well, I think that was part of the EU regulations that you couldn't dump raw sewage, maybe cooked sewage.
I don't think we've totally scrapped those regulations. I think we still have some regulations. But when there's flooding, when there's excess water, when there's issues, I think this was caused by a power cut. Then yeah, they have to shunt all the raw sewage out to sea. Nature's dustbin, I call it.
Well, yeah, that's how it's viewed. But I think, if anyone supports these kind of initiatives, there's only one way they can demonstrate that it is not of any massive hazard to regular civilians, and that would be to drink and bathe in said water.
Right.
I think if you work for that particular institution, you should be like, it's safe, and we should be able to ask you to prove and verify that.
When
guy with the
Selwyn
burger.
Gummer gave a burger to his daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I mean, he's not going to give her a raw poo.
No, maybe a Tesco lasagna, but surely not a raw. But anyway, the Sunday Times, and is Britain going back in time, Dean?
It's possible. Crystal Rig Wind Farm in the Board is one of the biggest wind farms, but they have said that 40% of Britain's electricity and wind power could not fill the gaps if we do experience some blackouts, which some ministers have predicted we may have to experience. Ofgem, the energy regulator, is expected to announce next week that bills will rise by as much as 80% from October to £3,000 a year, and this may be represented by the fact that now a lot of energy suppliers are entering into war game-like scenarios in order to manage logistics in the event that we may be experiencing maybe 4 or 5 days of blackouts, particularly around the Christmas period.
Yeah. And Ben, I mean, do you think that the government could have done anything with some foresight to avoid this?
I can't say I'm qualified to answer that very properly, but I remember, I'm older than most of you. I remember the blackouts in the 70s, and it was kind of weird because the power just went out and we would grab a candle and sit round and tell ghost stories until it came back on. But this seems yet another example of how we seem to be going sort of backwards, doesn't it? It's a lot of this stuff I thought would never happen again.
Yeah.
And it's kind of worrying, isn't it? This winter of discontent that's on the way that may have all sorts of... We'll be shivering, we'll be sitting in the dark, and we'll be wondering what the heck has happened.
Yeah.
Well, yes, especially the government has been encouraged by advisors of energy strategy to instruct Britons to maybe reduce their energy usage, but they have said that they're not sure if they want to do that because they don't like telling people what to do. But then they've gone on to say that maybe they could be sending armies of trained experts into people's homes to identify where they could reduce their heating demand, which I think are two massive extremes of not telling people what to do, than having the army come over and encourage them what to do.
Yeah.
Myself, personally, I feel like because Britain is very slow to encourage people to reduce their energy usage, maybe we can introduce some level of taxation to people that want to have massive Christmas lights. Me, personally, I see this a lot of the time, that during energy crises around Christmas, some people go absolutely crazy with the lights, and maybe there's some way we can penalise them for that. It doesn't just mean for Christmas. I know who's watching. Diwali people too. It's a festival of light. Let's reduce it. I say let's bring back macaroni decorations.
Macaroni decorations, stuck glued to a bit of... But with the food shortages, Dane, aren't you just replacing one crisis with another?
Christmas is a time of giving. Christmas is a time of giving, and if people that insist on having Christmas lights find that they're maybe experiencing blackouts and not able to cook food, they can maybe go and retrieve this from some of their neighbours.
Yeah.
You could eat your decorations.
You could eat your decorations.
Yeah, when things... Yeah, but you'd be eating them in the dark because you don't have Christmas lights up. Now, the Sunday Mirror. And speaking about power companies making profits, here's one that probably won't be making any profit then.
Yes, the company that owns Fukushima have been fined £330 billion. I mean, that's a big fine, isn't it? That is incredible that anybody can afford to pay a fine like that and still exist.
Yeah, it's like UVLA level.
Yeah, exactly. But this was the 2011 earthquake and the tsunami. I don't know what it is about earthquake zones and nuclear power plants that doesn't sound like an ideal pairing.
Yeah, it's...
you actually think the fact that this meltdown was caused by a tsunami might suggest that wave power might be the way to go for the Japanese.
Then you've got to have a tsunami every half an hour, which is very hard.
I imagine a tsunami would create quite a bit of power. You could probably just do it once a month.
Right.
Again, I'm not an expert. I'm just giving my,
But it's also the land of the rising sun, so maybe solar power could work as well.
Yes,
the sun's rising. Maybe get a hold of that early. It's really. I mean, it sounds like it's a massive amount, but given the amount of damage that can be caused by nuclear radiation or any fallout, I wouldn't say it's necessarily that bad. I think if they got the money to give, they can do it. And, I just feel, it was the worst nuclear disaster to Chernobyl as well. And I just think, myself personally, nuclear power belongs only in warp drives and episodes of The Simpsons. I think we are advanced enough. And I understand that, Japan, based on where they are placed geographically, don't have the same access to fossil fuels and energy as other nations, but I think at the same time, being that they are so known for their technological prowess, there's no real excuse to still be relying on types of power such as nuclear. I mean, they make all the Godzilla films.
But nuclear, yeah, well, that's a good point. If there's no nuclear radiation going into the sea, we're not going to get the next Godzilla. But also, nuclear is actually the safest form of power after solar power. So even wind power is more dangerous.
But it's the legacy, isn't it, of nuclear power? That's the bit that nobody really discusses. It's like, it's really good, it's really efficient, it's really clean, but we are going to leave our great-grandchildren with these piles of radioactive stuff.
We'll just stick it in a mountain. It'll be fine. Anyway, well, that's all for part one. Coming up in part two, we've got China up to its usual tricks, a bad time to be the BBC, and woke Twitter workers. See you in 2 minutes.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Leo Kearse. I'm still joined by these rascals, Dame Baptiste and Ben Norris. Anyway, let's crack on. We've got the Sunday Express, and with tension soaring in the east, China is flexing its muscles, Dane.
Yeah, according to the Daily Express, China has warned Taiwan that they will smash them to smithereens as tensions soar as the US have appeared to be back in Taiwan following Nancy Pelosi's visit. And in response, the Chinese military has launched military drills in territory close to Taiwan. For those who don't know, China fails to recognize Taiwan as a separate nation and considers it a part of Chinese territory. They've begun these military drills. The US continue to back Taiwan and prevent an occupation from the People's Republic, but they have also spoken to strategists who say that the US entering into any kind of conflict with China will bode very badly and could lead to the loss of up to 900 warplanes if there was to be a conflict with the Asian nation.
So the US would lose 900 warplanes, right?
Just for start.
How many has it got?
I reckon they do pretty well, to be honest. It's probably not
as long as it's
track.
got loads more than that, I'm fine with that. Ben, do you think this is something?
I mean, it's good that we can laugh about this now. This is quite a terrifying story, isn't it? And it's been sort of bubbling up for a long time. But the language, smash them to smithereens. That's right up there with my daddy's bigger than your dad.
Yeah. And really, this conflict does come down to dads, doesn't it? Because it's forefathers who've now seen Taiwan being separated. But yeah, this has been ongoing, and this goes back to tensions that have been alive since as far back as World War II.
Yeah.
And it's not something that China has let go, and as they have risen to a more prolific position on a global stage, examples of trying to re-annex Hong Kong.
Yeah.
They're definitely flexing their muscles.
As well.
And exactly. And what you don't normally want if another country appears to be flexing their muscles is Americans going, don't do that, we got muscles too. That's always a bad sign.
Well, America's had a deal with Taiwan, I think going back to the 50s or possibly even the Second World War, where they will protect Taiwan. It's almost like a NATO type agreement. If there's, if Chinese soldiers set foot on Taiwan soil, then America will step in. And in fact, in Russia, there's a saying that says, it's called a Chinese final warning, and it's a warning that carries no weight, because apparently there's been like 900 Chinese final warnings about, American military sorties in the region.
Yeah.
But now it's now that China's actually got the sort of military clout to do something about it, it's looking more...
I wouldn't underestimate 900 warnings, because China has one of the biggest populations in the world. So maybe 900 people did give a warning, but there's plenty more where that came from. And depending on, you've got a population that's that large, maybe need that many warnings. But to us, that might be like a third warning.
Right.
Just based on having to adjust it for population size.
Yeah.
But yeah,
billions of people.
I agree with Ben, it's very scary. I think when there are rising tensions between nations, the last thing you need is the American military-industrial complex being involved in any kind of resolution of conflict, which was not helped by the Biden administration going to visit. I'm
looking forward to Trump getting back in and sorting it out.
You mean the guy who came back from North Korea? That went well, didn't it?
Well, there wasn't any of this when Trump was in power. Everybody was scared of him because he was so, they were like, well, he might actually do it. Now everything's, moving chess pieces on a board. People like Putin and China
so everyone else is playing political chess and Trump is playing checkers.
Yeah.
You think that's the safest strategy to go with?
Well, sticking with China, The Observer has a story about how they could be spying on us. Can you tell us about this, please, Ben?
Well, it's according to this, there's this thing called Biobank, and it had all these projects, and they have the DNA of 500,000 UK citizens, and they sort of rent it out to interested parties who are doing all sorts of research on the DNA, and people are a bit anxious about China's access to our DNA, and it's not clear what China could actually do with the DNA of 500,000 British citizens. Personally, I try and leave my DNA in as few places as possible.
That's good to hear.
Another jab at the former Prime Minister, sounds like, Ben, but a justified one.
I just don't want to be cloned again.
And you think they could do that from a tissue left in a travel edge?
Do you know, I was going to leave that slightly less detailed, but thank you for bringing it home.
Dane, is this something that worries you? Do you think China, COVID-20, could be something that targets us based on our DNA?
I mean, it does look very dubious when the country from where the COVID-19 originated now is trying to get a hold of biodata from the West, although Biobank have insisted that they do have guidelines of a moral, ethical way to make sure that all of the data that is retrieved or they've sold to external parties is only used for research purposes. Although you can get a hold of the data from between £3,000 to £9,000, which I feel kind of does trouble me to an extent.
Yeah.
But, you know, it just might be just us on the cusp of new emerging technologies, and that is very scary when it does involve the human genome.
And when it involves Chinese companies which are ultimately controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, which isn't beholden to sort of moral rules around testing on animals or even testing on humans. There's evidence that they test on Uyghur Muslims, which is obviously horrific, but will also advance any medicine that they've got faster than the West would.
Which is weird because the Biobank is a UK-based company, so you'd think that they would be utilising the information and data that they have for our overall benefit. But I suppose that's very hard to do when you are living in a country on the cusp of privatising their healthcare service.
Yeah.
So money has to be made, unfortunately.
Yeah, I love money. Anyway, the Sunday Telegraph now, and monkeypox is now another STI to add to the growing list, Dane.
Yes, there has been calls for the World Health Organization to reclassify monkeypox as an STI in order to increase awareness of it and to increase or streamline the logistics of testing, and also to reduce the stigma, because in the UK we have about 3,000 cases of monkeypox, and of those cases 97% of them are from gay men. So there's been large calls particularly from Professor Rossi Hassad, who's an epidemiologist at Mercy College, who says that we should classify it as a sexually transmitted infection in order to remove the stigma and to raise awareness and to encourage more testing.
Yeah, so apparently outside of sexual contact, it doesn't spread in the sort of wider population. It doesn't spread at all quickly. So, I mean, what do you think of this reclassification? A good idea?
So that's how you have to be intimate with someone to get the monkeypox.
Pretty much. I mean, there are instances. So, I mean, some children have got it, which God forbid. I hope that's not from any intimate contact. And also, dogs have got it from their owners, which I assume is jumping on the bed and being hugged, rather than.
I choose not to. I choose not to attack any of your assumptions, Leo.
Let's call it a special hug. It's a special hug.
But no, I think if this is going to encourage awareness, I think it's a very good idea. I think there is always an issue when historically marginalised groups are revealed as having the largest prevalence when it comes to epidemics or pandemics. And I think it's very important if we can reclassify it as an STI, because we should all remember what happened last time a sexually transmitted infection that appeared to only affect gay men was ignored en masse by the world. So I think it's a very good idea if it's going to affect the outbreak. Although in this country they are developing treatment for monkeypox and we've had no recorded fatalities. So far, so good. And yeah, whatever keeps me out of is doing Zoom calls.
And sticking with the Telegraph, and our rivals are having a tough time, Ben.
Right. So this is the... Oh, yes. So the BBC have basically been... They're under so much pressure to kind of cut costs that they're going to have far less news output and not going to be having 24-hour rolling news so much anymore. I'm not sure what time it's going to go up to, but I had an idea. So this is something I think the BBC could definitely do. So how about amalgamating news and drama output, and maybe have the big news stories of the day being discussed by the characters on The Archers. So you could have Peggy Woolley and Mike Tucker discussing the Northern Ireland protocols in The Bull one evening, and or big furore at Lower Loxley as Jennifer Aldridge and Jill Archer discuss asylum seekers. Like that. I think it could really liven up The Archers and keep us informed.
Yeah, kill two birds with one stone. And talking of the Northern Ireland protocol, so in fact there was the Belfast 12th of July parade that the BBC has traditionally covered, and they didn't cover it, and it was picked up by GBNews, who covered it. So this article, which wasn't commissioned by GBNews, I swear to God, we didn't pay for this. It's quite glowing coverage.
GBNews, the muscle of news coverage, loves the jobs that you hate, BBC. Trying to wise up as soon as possible. I mean, it does bode very badly for the government-backed channel, but they are, by being a government institution, they are always going to be under pressure to cut costs. I would say maybe a way of remedying that would to be focusing on quality over quantity. So if they have to cut back on their programming, maybe more investment could go into making sure there is quality programming, which would lead them a bit more predisposed to syndication in the global markets and maybe allow for more international coverage.
But the Orange Man Parade coverage, I mean, that's I guess somewhere they could have saved money straight away by just showing footage from last year or the year before. I mean, it doesn't change much.
Right, I thought you were going to say something about Trump there.
But you know what I mean? No one's going to know.
Yeah. Also, they could get me to pay my licence fee. I haven't paid it in 15 years. So that's all for part 2. After the break, we will be discussing if going topless is offensive, do spiders dream, and why French is sexist. See you in 2 minutes.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Leo Kearse. I'm joined by Dane Baptiste and Ben Norris. And now we're going through the weirder stories of the day in Section 3. So the Mail on Sunday brings us some interesting news from the world of golf, Ben.
Yes, well, it's, I mean, you know, you'd have to be crazy to not carefully approach these transgender athlete stories, because it's a bit of a minefield, isn't it? And it's complicated and complex and nuanced, and you know, you don't want to just stumble into this topic. And, you know, so anyway, I think we should move on to the next story. No, no, but I mean, it's a transgender woman golfer, Hailey Davidson, who used to compete as a man in golf and now is competing as a woman, and it's, you know, there's a classic Ferrari going on, but I have to say the temptation to describe a transgender woman golfer as having had 2 holes in one was too much for me.
And Dane, what do you think about this? I mean, it's in other sports, I guess we see there's an obvious advantage for males because you know, males tend to be bigger and stronger and all the rest of it. So weightlifting, boxing, things like that. Golf is much more of a sort of amble around a golf course. Although the Hailey Davidson, which does sound like a stripper, she says that after her transition, she now hits the ball 15 miles per hour slower.
Well, I can't speak for Hayley Davidson's progress because I don't really pay that much attention to golf in general. But I'm aware that acronym. I mean, I guess I would say it's not for me really. But I think any discussion when it comes to
wouldn't it be funny if from this we've offended the golf community more than the trans community?
Or maybe they come together and in order to bring us all down. But and if that galvanization happens, I'm here for it. I think it's very hard to have an open conversation about the proliferation of transgender competitors in sports. I think we can't have this conversation until we address what I believe to be a double standard when it comes to athletes like Caster Semenya, who was born biologically a female but has a high testosterone output and has been forced by Olympic officials to have hormone therapy. So I think unless we address this case in the event where it has occurred naturally without a transition, it could be very hard. So. She
has, as I understand it, she's female and she's got a chromosomal defect, which is like rare and sort of to the side of the transgender debate. But she definitely influenced. I mean, if you've got like people who are born male and went through male puberty, which gives a huge advantage in terms of strength and stamina and being able to parallel park outside the stadium. And then Caster Semenya on the other hand, who's born female, is treated almost given worse treatment by the athletic bodies.
Yeah, and I feel until that is addressed, it's going to be very hard to look at all of these instances on a case-by-case basis. But I feel like personally, I would say to the detractors towards Hayley in competing that nobody would willingly, surgically change 3 holes in order to be more proficient across 18 of them. So, I think that there's been a lot of consideration that's gone into Hayley having hormone therapy and still being able to compete. But I think, if you've got the time and if you're prepared to go, everyone still has to do 10,000 hours irrespective of gender. So let's just see how it turns out. I mean, personally, I'm somebody who is for anything that can enhance or make sports more interesting. Yeah. I'm totally for it. Performance-enhancing drugs, they're called performance-enhancing drugs. Why do we not use them?
That's a very good point. Exactly. And if trans athletes are better than female athletes, why not just let lots and lots of trans athletes into the athletics and they'll be better and faster. Sticking with the Mail on Sunday, are you guys offended by toplessness?
I think, it's something I look at a case-by-case basis. But, I don't think I'm necessarily offended. But this is not really about me necessarily, and I daren't put myself in a position where I might mansplain. But it seems that, according to the Daily Mail, women are more offended by others going topless, but men are not. Scientists have found that what they tend to find is that there's more of what's referred to as intrasexual policing that happens between some women in terms of those that choose to go topless in public. And this all is against the backdrop of the Brighton festival in order to free the nipple, in which men and women alike all go in a pride parade in order to celebrate the human body and to resist the over-sexualization that comes from the male gaze.
So, that's when you say male gaze, because it's in Brighton, do you mean... Anyway.
Well, I was going to say, if, fundamentally, we've kind of eroticised the breast, perhaps a bit more than we should have done culturally. And if we saw breasts more often, I think we'd be over it pretty quick. I think within a week we'd be like, oh yeah, well there's.
This is a great strategy for being able to see more breasts. Well, I like this logic.
They are just baby feeders, aren't they? So as gorgeous and lovely as we heterosexual men might find them, they've got a primary role that's nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think it's a real issue that 3 heterosexual cisgender men are sitting here discussing the status of bearing breasts. What about lesbians? They like breasts too.
That's true.
But we never speak about how lesbians feel about it. And they should always weigh in on that, because I feel like, I'm an ally in the sense that if lesbians want to join me in terms of encouraging the freeing of the nipple from various genders, we should go ahead with that.
We'll make some phone calls after the show. Sticking with the times, and La Francais continues to be the language of love, Ben.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I spent as long as I could on this story and basically had to face the fact that I failed at French at school. I They tried as hard as they could to teach me, and I'm dressed as a French person. They tried so hard to teach me French, and I just didn't get it. And of course, this story is actually about one of the things about French that I found bewildering, and it's the gender attachment to, you know, sort of nouns and adjectives and things, and some things being female and some things being masculine, and how confusing that is. You know, like the word for door in French is porte, and porte is feminine. So, you know, a door is a woman, right?
Yeah.
And
a pole would be masculine.
What?
A pole would be masculine.
Possibly, I haven't got that here.
That better not be on the test, Leo, because me and Ben are going to fail it. So,
Fenêtre, the French word for window, feminine.
Yeah.
Whereas the French word for table, tableau, masculine.
That makes no sense. How are you supposed to? It just adds an extra layer of complication. That it's already a foreign language because it's French. So why are they making it even more complicated?
I think it's to put us off.
Is that why? Well, I mean, it worked.
Yeah.
With the referendum.
Absolutely. And just to add, according to feminist influencer Typhane D, she has received insults and threats of death and sexual assault over her attempts to redress the French language and to place feminine nouns and adjectives in the primary position of sentences as opposed to the male. Typically, the French grammatic rule is that if you have a masculine noun, then that goes as the first idea of the sentence, and then the feminine following.
So men come first.
Yeah, is what she's saying. However, I feel the French language by nature is a very nice language. I think a large part of the British population are Francophiles and do tend to enjoy French words such as faux pas.
Yeah, croissant,
which we make many of as well. Me personally, I think while I find the idea that the attacks on Typhane Day have been abhorrent, I think that she shouldn't make too much work for herself, because to most people outside of the nation, French in its nature is more of a feminist or feminine language.
Yeah.
Like, you can't be manly and say ooh la la.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think as you go south, I mean, because you start in Scotland very masculine, you get to England slightly feminine, then France fully feminine. And probably by the time you get to the Sahara, everybody's wearing a skirt. Sticking with the times, and you've heard of Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, now it's time for the Seven Brothers and the medical marijuana, Dean.
Yes, this is about the CBD revolution. Seven brothers are on a medical marijuana mission. They have set the Colorado-based Stanley Brothers are some of the biggest producers of cannabis for adults and children with chronic illness, and they're looking to expand on the UK. So just a bit of background on this family. The Stanley Brothers, they're number 7 of them, and they are 7 of the entire brood of 11 siblings. So they have 4 sisters.
Whoa!
Their father walked out on them when they were very young.
Who can blame him?
I mean, yeah, if I tell.
He didn't walk out straight away. He stayed for quite a while.
I mean, dawned upon him what he'd done.
Yeah, and then so they were left kind of to do their own devices, and then began following the legislation which allowed for the free distribution and growing and use of medical marijuana in Colorado, have been able to put together a multi-million-dollar business, which they could have retired from after floating on the stock market and reporting profits of over 80 million.
Wow.
Have now set their sights on working with distributors in the UK based on a number of medical applications that CBD has. Yeah. So CBD has been proven to help with chronic pain that results from chemotherapy for cancer sufferers, as well as helping out with degenerative conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, and has also been shown to reduce the amount of seizures for children suffering for epilepsy. Right. So for those who don't know, CBD is part of the marijuana plant and is distinct. And what actually happened was it's distinct. CBD works very differently to the other active ingredient in marijuana, which is THC, which causes like the feeling of the high,
the paranoia,
and to an extent, depending on which strain you.
The munchies.
Yeah, or the munchies. So the CBD is kind of separated from that, and the Stanley Brothers basically have developed a THC-free strain, which they call Hippie's Disappointment.
Right.
Which has.
Did they really call it Hippie's Disappointment?
They call it, yeah. They call it Hippie's Disappointment.
Amazing.
I mean, I find it I think it's very good. I always want to encourage small to medium enterprise. I think that at times when you're dealing with a cost of living crisis, because a lot of the marijuana and CBD legislation in America came about following the 2008 banking crash.
Yeah.
And so Colorado is one of the first states in America to legalize the grow and sale of marijuana for medicinal applications, and a number of different states have followed suit. And so, yeah, they have been able to turn their lives around. And I just think, you know, I'll be honest, being that I'm the person on this show that identifies as black, I feel like it's very interesting that 7 white guys who had their father walk out on them and started selling drugs to make money are being lauded in the press, where I know loads of people whose dads walked out of them who had to cram 5 people on a bed on a council estate, and they're called drug dealers, or they are now called successful rappers. But the point is that it's an interesting story. But I think that, you know, I've always felt, and I'm based on my political disposition, it's very strange that we ever try to legislate against a plant.
Yeah, or a mushroom. That doesn't make any sense either. Anyway, the Mail on Sunday now, and winter is coming. Sorry, that's a bit premature, but an early autumn appears to be here, Ben.
Yes, this thing is called a false autumn, and it's obviously the drought, the environmental issues. The trees apparently are stressed by the hot weather, and I have to say the trees must find our behaviour very annoying, right? Because, I mean, most people agree this is a human-created climate change causing the unparalleled heat, making the trees stressed and their leaves turn brown. And then what do? We go and sit under the trees to try and get a bit of shade from the scorching sunshine. The trees must be absolutely livid.
So they're looking down at us. You know, we're in hot weather, which I think is great, by the way. I mean, I understand climate change is probably man-made, but I don't see it as a massive problem.
I mean, you say that, Leo, there's only one way to prove it. You go down to one of these beaches that the raw sewage is getting poured out, and you show me how much fun you can really have. And then I believe you if you don't think that the climate change is a massive problem.
You don't know what fetishes I've got, Dane. I could have a great time down there. Anyway.
Well, the point is that, you know, I come from a political group that won't shame you for said kinks.
Good. And moving on, we have a story about spiders. The Observer now. And if androids dream of electric sheep, what do spiders dream of, Dane?
Well, they're not electric flies, as most people might assume, but this comes from a team of universities based in Germany, Italy, and also Harvard University in the US, who are doing a conjoined bit of research on arachnids, because they have noticed that while they don't necessarily have the same kind of anatomy we do have, because spiders tend to sense through vibrations onto their skin.
They got more legs as well.
Just a few. Depends. Just a few, but again, it depends how you identify. Some people might be transarachnid, and I'm going to come on here and offend them. Also, so they reckon that maybe spiders, because they've seen a lot of eye movement and movement of limbs and vibration, it's possible that they are experiencing dreams or images very similar to cats and dogs, and some of the images they pick up during the day might be being repeated back to their brains during the night.
Right. I mean, this is a lot of speculation by scientists. Sounds an awful lot like climate change in that regard. Hopefully, we've got enough time to squeeze this one in. So the Mirror next, and what better way to pay your respects than a penis-shaped grave? Looks like somebody stole my idea. Ben.
Yes.
Sorry, Dane.
So yeah, this is about a bizarre cemetery which is filled with genitalia-shaped gravestones, and of all the places that this this graveyard exists is actually in Iran, which is known for being quite conservative. However, if you go to the Khalid Nabi cemetery, you can see a number of different gravestones shaped like genitalia. Now, some archaeologists believe that this comes from cults of phallus worship that were based in Asia and India, although, I mean, chance would be a fine thing to live in a nation where a phallus is worshipped. It's also said that this is the gravestone of Yemenite Christian prophet Khalid's tomb as well, is based there. But the downside of that is because of the fact that they have genital-shaped gravestones, they get a number of tourists visiting, which has led to a lot of vandalism. And since the 1980s, of the 600 gravestones, only 200 remain.
And Ben, would you go here on holiday?
I think it sounds quite interesting, doesn't it? 'Cause especially, you know, it makes sense, doesn't it? A kind of a penis-shaped gravestone, because you've got, you know, a stiff under the ground and one on top of it as well.
Yeah, I'd go to Bonehenge.
OK, that's all we've got time for tonight. Thank you to my brilliant guests, Dane Baptiste and Ben Norris. Headliners is back tomorrow at 11. Nick Dixon on the hot seat, and I'm on the panel with Sajila Kershi. Good night.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
On Mark Dolan Tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate, and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for big guests, big opinions, and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the